Good morning, Slop Nation. This is Slop Chop, a new podcast about the happenings of the internet. I am not Harvey. I'm Landon. And this is your one and only stop for Slop. We are on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Housekeeping at the top. If you don't care about a topic, there are time codes in the description. Feel free to slip around. YouTube sometimes won't show that, but they're always in the description. We've got some great slop picks for you today. Some timely, some unusual, some that may make you sad. But here on Slop Chop, we like to cover all the various ins and outs of the world. And where else to start but with our good host that we know and love, Harvey. I'm guesting for him today because, as many of you may know, he's still recovering from his Brazilian butt lift. But I will tell you guys that it is going to be worth the wait. And even if you're audio only, I can tell you that the lift has made his voice even smoother. So you guys don't need to worry. He's fine. And he, for some reason, has entrusted me with his baby. And, I'm here to just not completely fuck it up. Today, I'm happy to announce the first ever Slop Chop soccer update. As I'm sure all of you know, as of the date of this recording, today is the last day of the 25-26 Premier League season. For those of you who may not remember, soccer is the game where you just kick the ball around with your feet. Your kid's daughter probably plays it. And if you played it growing up, you were probably called some emasculating names. But it's getting better now in the States. Now we're hosting the World Cup. That's going great. Tickets cheaper than they've ever been. America, it's the best place for it right now, and then we got Canada and Mexico helping us out. I mean, it's going to be a beautiful thing with no controversy. So I don't want any of you to worry about it. And don't worry, there's not gonna be any corruption. It's not gonna be any shady things going on. It's just gonna be the beautiful game. But we're not talking about the World Cup today. We're talking about Arsenal, who today lifted the Premier League trophy for the first time in 22 years. And of course, as you guys know, that meant that today the two best teams in the league, Arsenal and Manchester City, played against one another to determine who would be bathed in glory and who would receive the millions of dollars that accompany such an honor. Well, if you think that, you're just America-pilled, because the English, they don't do things like that. They don't do a playoff. They like things just a little bit different. They've got car parks, they've got lifts, they've got trolleys, and instead of doing playoffs, they have what is called the table. And I know, Landon, that sounds so exciting. Tell me more. Well, you're in luck because I'm about to. So the Premier League, most wealthiest league in the world, probably most viewed, most, handsomest boys, maybe in all sport, has 20 teams. And how the Premier League operates is that each of the 20 teams plays 38 games a season. You play every team twice, one at home, one away. And for every win, you get 3 points. You get 0 points for a loss. And if you draw, you get 1 point. And now that's another thing Americans love, draws and ties. It's just, it's so satisfying after a game to just know that you were as equally shitty as the other team. I mean, that's what sports are all about. And so as the season goes on, teams collect points and rise and fall within the table. And what's bizarre is that Arsenal won the league last week, not today, even though they lifted the trophy today. And that's because mathematically they were so far ahead after City tied with Bournemouth that they couldn't be caught. And so the league creates this bizarre sporting phenomenon. In all of American sport that I can think of, we never have a trophy given when it is not the two quote, best teams, usually from the East and the West, playing it out in one game or a series. I mean, hockey, basketball, baseball, football, except for the weird, you know, like who wins your division thing, which has always been confusing to me. But in American sport, it's always a playoff. It is always head to head, and that's exciting. I mean, it's you've got what? You've got the two apparently best teams duking it out in one game, do or die. And the table system is bizarre because it lets you win or lose when you're not even playing. And I've been curious about this for a long time. And so I spoke with our Slop Chop UK correspondents, and I was like, hey, what is up with this? Why do they not do a playoff? Other European leagues, like the Champions League, the Europa League, that's a playoff. Why doesn't Europe, why doesn't England do that? Well, it turns out that it's actually slop related reasons, audience. Slop Nation, turns out the table format actually creates the best opportunity for banter and hate watching. So Landon, how is that possible? How what's the big deal with that? Well, so there's several things we got to consider. So first of all, England, not as big as America. I know. Hard to comprehend, but yes, they're a country smaller than us. In size, population, everything really. And they have an almost tribal following of their soccer teams. It is like crimes committed when a team loses. I mean, for us, it's like the Eagles win the Super Bowl, they destroy their city. That's like once every 5 years. The English, they've been stabbing each other and beating each other and starting fires because of soccer for years upon years. And part of why that is because London and, England in general, very densely populated. And so your hated rivals may be your next door neighbor. You are constantly running into people who hate your team. It's so rough over there that, you basically, like, when you go to play an away game, you're like segregated from the other fans because there's so many fights. There's so many opportunities for things to go horribly wrong. And in America, we have like the benefit, outside of the coast of your rival isn't in your face all the time. Take Dallas, for example. I mean, we don't have a rival team within 300 miles of us in any sport. We don't have the constant in your face, guy at work, your bartender, your mom, just rubbing every single game in your face. And, because of the table, the leader changes week to week. And so as the season goes on, the better teams rack up points, and it becomes this kind of head-to-head race on who is going to be able to win the most games and who's going to be able to win them by the biggest margins. And as the pressure builds, it just gives you more and more opportunities to inflict psychological damage on your opponents. I mean, for one, and I'm sorry, Slop Nation, you're going to have to accept this, that the English they're just better shit talkers than we are. They are so mean to each other in ways that it's hard to define. Like, I'll tell you a story. So growing up, I played soccer, and we were in a tournament here in Dallas, and we hosted a team of British lads. I was like 14, and they came and stayed with us. I hosted 2 guys. Every household hosted 2 British guys. Super cool experience. Like, just, they're funny, sarcastic. I mean, they were good guys. And, it was the first time I'd ever really interacted with anyone from like another country. But what stuck out to me was the cruelty on which they inflicted or that they inflicted on each other. So there was one guy that, somehow the kids figured out that he was the product of artificial insemination. So they called him Test Tube to his face. There was another guy who they knew his mom changed her name from Shelly to Kelly. So they called her Shelly Kelly. It's just like, they just personal digs at each other, like things that would make you cry if you were a soft American like myself. But that's just how they roll. That's what they like doing. They just like being dicks to each other. And I mean, it was hilarious, but I'm glad I didn't have to deal with it firsthand. I'm glad they didn't know my secrets. Any horrible thing from my past, they could turn into a play on words and sing it, perhaps. And all of this shit talking is seen in real life, of course. But it's also just brutally dished out online. I mean, it is an ugly place to be a sports fan. And I've been an Arsenal fan for over 10 years, I think. I can't remember exactly why I started supporting them. Perhaps FIFA related. Maybe I just like their colors. I don't know. But Arsenal's been getting shit on for, not the last 22 years, but a long time. Partly because they have come in second the last 3 years. The British call that bottling. We call it choking. I don't know why they call it bottling. Probably should have looked that up before. But they're just so vicious about sport. Like, several weeks ago, Arsenal dropped points against Bournemouth. It was looking bad. It was looking like they were going to choke again. They were going to bottle it. People on YouTube, just ruthless. Here's one from Corey Rowe on YouTube. Arsenal once again showing they can't handle the pressure of a title race. This was too predictable. They're absolutely cooked. And it's not just people online, it's also pundits. People would talk about, there's nothing beautiful about them. They're going to be the most boring champion if they win. They're the ugliest soccer players. They play the ugliest soccer. No way, they're the ugliest soccer players. The racist layers of calling how they play haram ball, or tear ball, which, to use a football analogy, a good comparison for Arsenal is Iowa. The University of Iowa when it comes to football. Arsenal was grinding games out, winning by defensive determination and set pieces, which in football terms would be field goals. Their opponents, or the other team facing them, Man City, let's think of more of a, your Alabamas, your Georgias, your dynastic, loved, and respected ruthless machines. Another example of the cruelty of British banter can be seen in the Manchester City bottle fan, which I don't know if you guys have seen, but it's during one of the games and it wasn't looking like Arsenal were going to win, looking like they were going to choke. A Man City fan was animatedly drinking out of an Arsenal water bottle. Just almost an industry plant level of banter. I mean, sort of inconceivable that, this guy just happened to bring this bottle. He just happened to be right where the cameras were, right at the perfect time. And, without the table format, that pressure doesn't build. Every week, if you drop a point and it's neck and neck, your season could be over. I mean, it becomes that's the coolest thing about the EPL to me, is that every single week, every single game matters because everyone is fighting for points. And you end up watching games that normally you would have no interest in. Like you watch a game because you hate another team. The table. It generates hate watching. And a big part of that too is that unlike any American sport, the EPL has a thing called relegation, which if you are in the bottom 3 of the 20, you get kicked out of the league. You get dropped to the B League. And 3 teams from the league below, they get promoted every single year. So not only is every single team fighting for survival, each week that survival could be put in more and more jeopardy. Today, for example, Arsenal's rivals, Tottenham Hotspur, had to win today's game. If they did not win their game today and West Ham won, they would have gotten relegated, booted. A team been in the Premier League for I don't know how long, 20-something years. It would be like if the Cowboys just got booted to the, XFL if they came in last. I mean, it's an unheard of thing in American sport, but it is so exciting because there's always stakes at everywhere in the league. But as I've been, suffering this season, internet people shit talking, just soccer Twitter, which somehow I see even though I don't have Twitter. Just it was brutal. It was brutal. But Arsenal got over the line. I knew they would. I didn't doubt it at all. I had no panic attacks at all. Ask any of my friends. But all this got me thinking about the hate watch and banter at all. Why do we engage in hate watching in sports? Is it just that we know how it feels to get whooped, that we know what it's like to suffer, and so when we see another team experience what we've experienced, it makes us feel better? Is it just like a dopamine thing? Is it just that, Wikipedia says hate watching is, because you have such strong emotions that it basically releases feel-good chemicals in your body? But, or do we hate watch because we know other people watch our teams and hate them? It's an interesting phenomenon that, there are plenty of people who would rather see a team they hate lose than them win. The hate watch has been, sort of an unfamiliar thing to me. Growing up, I didn't really follow sports. Like, I'd half-ass watch things, but, I never really got into it until I started following Arsenal. And I played soccer growing up, and, as I got older and slower, I couldn't play as much. And so I started getting invested in, and this was really like the first year I ever watched a sport and gave a shit about it. Or was thoroughly invested. And when Arsenal won, it was because City was playing Bournemouth, the very team that humiliated Arsenal a few weeks ago. And I was watching that game. It did nothing. Arsenal wasn't playing, but when City drew and it meant Arsenal won mathematically, I got to see the Manchester City faces, the pain on everybody's face, the knowledge that they couldn't get it done, that they had lost, and that, my team, the bridesmaids, finally became the bride. And it was a bizarre Schadenfreude that I don't think I'd ever experienced. I went to OU for undergrad, and, OU's been disappointing since 2000 and whenever we won our last championship, 2000 maybe. And, I've never been able to get behind the team that much as much as I support them. I've never felt the need for a victory this bad. And I don't know that I would have felt as strongly about it if I wasn't exposed to the banter, if I didn't see how badly people wanted Arsenal to lose. How they would rather have they'd rather have their own team booted from the league than us win it. And it was just sort of an interesting phenomenon for me. It was something that I thought I was better than, and it turns out I'm just as, tribal and lizard brain as everybody else. But, it's a weird way to experience it because of the table format. So, here at Slop Chop, we endorse soccer fully. We don't call it football, just like New Zealand or wherever else. We still call it soccer. But, I encourage all of you to check out the league next season. Soccer Twitter is reprehensible, but man, is it golden slop. I mean, one of the biggest outcomes of Arsenal's victory is the death of r/soccer circle jerk, which I know all of you are sad that, a huge blow was dealt to one of our beloved websites here at Slop Chop. I know Harvey's always giving out Reddit gold to kind strangers, but there was something so satisfying about people calling for the subreddit to get shut down because their golden joke had been undone. So all of this to say, as fun as sport can be, as exciting as watching your team win, there's something primal about knowing that someone else is suffering because of your victory. And I know that's a dark way to look at it, but it's the Slop way. And pick a random team. If you don't watch soccer, pick a random team, follow them. I promise you will get some great enjoyment either out of your team winning or another team losing. All right, folks, today we're going to start with Shakira. Shakira. You know her. You love her. But how much do you really know about her? The Queen of Latin music, as she's called, according to Wikipedia, has had a long and illustrious career. She's had 12 albums, a few seasons on The Voice, and of course, she's the gazelle from Zootopia. And outside of making a generation of furries, which is an important part of all animated movies, it was Space Jam at one point. I'm sure you guys recall the outrage of Space Jam 2. Every few years, we have to have a new furry trendsetter, and Shakira was that for this newest generation. But when she wasn't making new furries, she actually made one of the most important contributions to modern music, and that's with the 2006 banger "Hips Don't Lie." Not only did it rock the charts then, but it has rocked every single school dance since, and will do so for the next 300 years. It went double platinum in both physical and digital downloads, and much more importantly, it won an MTV Music Video Award for Best Choreography in a Video. And anyone who's my age has seen that video many, many, many times. And, it was life-changing for very many of us. But the interesting thing about that song is kind of how it pertains to what Shakira has been dealing with. As some of you may know, she's been tangled up with the Spanish tax authorities, who have alleged that she committed tax fraud in the ballpark of $64 million, which is tough. It's tough if you're Shakira. It's you don't think a star like that, celebrities, they don't break the law. They don't, try and get out of things just because they're rich and famous. And Shakira, she didn't do anything wrong. She was acquitted last week by Spain's highest court, which overturned a $64 million fine, given her alleged tax fraud. And on top of that, the Spanish Treasury has been ordered to reimburse Shakira for $70 million. The Spanish authorities tried to claim that the singer had been a tax resident in Spain while she was dating FC Barcelona center back Gerard Piqué. But ultimately, they could not prove that she spent more than 183 days in Spain in 2011. one thing that's come up that I've been thinking about is how would the Spanish authorities even try and prove that Shakira wasn't where they say she was for 183 dates in Spain? You know, do they depose her boyfriend or her various stylists, her hairdressers? You know, I mean, her choreographer. I mean, you know, she's got to be a busy lady. You know, how could you prove where she was? You know, I mean, there's just and even if you did, you know, I don't know if this is a jury trial, if they even have them in Spain, but you know, she's pretty well loved. You know, this is not someone who is disliked by anyone as far as I know. I mean, admittedly, you know, I looked at all her albums and I really know like one song by her. But it doesn't mean that she's any less of a national treasure because, you know, you can have one song and be iconic forever, especially when that one song has a, you know, music video that, you know, was a sexual awakening for many young men across the country in 2006. Um and I think another thing that's interesting is that, you know, that song Hips Don't Lie of course features former Fugees member Fugees. I've actually never heard it said. I've just seen it. We'll say Fuji member Wyclef Jean. And as some of you may recall, Wyclef Jean, you know, uh, probably infamous for running a charity after the Haiti earthquakes, in which he's alleged to have spent more than $9 million of charitable donations on travel for himself and its representatives. Um, you know, he spent money that people donated for Haiti disaster relief on salaries, consultants fees, and expenses. And you know what else? He didn't file multiple tax returns. So I wonder if in 2005 or six, you know, they're in the studio together and Wyclef turns to Shakira and says, "Hey, Shakira, look, you don't need to be paying these taxes. I've got. Let me tell you. Let me tell you how to do it. You just lie. You just, you know, you're so beloved, Shakira. No one will stop you. We made Hips Don't Lie. This song is good enough that we'll never have consequences for our actions." And Wyclef Jean, he's never been prosecuted to my knowledge. You know, I mean, there's been some like reports, but it's been so bizarre that he committed this massive fraud, allegedly, of course. And you know, he's never been put in jail. He's never been investigated. No one's ever raided his house, to my knowledge. But you know, that's the power of putting out an absolute banger song. And you know, I'm not saying that Shakira learned all of her traits, you know, tax evasion traits from Wyclef Jean. I mean, Gerard Piqué at Barcelona, you know, knew Lionel Messi, also tax evader. Cristiano Ronaldo, same league, uh, also tax evader. But you know, they got their sentences commuted or put into fines. You know, like apparently just committing fraud in Spain for taxes is just not that big a deal. And when you're rich, you don't have to follow law. You can just, you know, if you're good enough at something, if you're a beloved athlete, if you made Hips Don't Lie, or, you know, I'm sure Wyclef Jean has other songs. Maybe. I mean, he's Young Thug made a song about him, sort of. But you know, like when you're that beloved, you don't have to pay your taxes. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to remember is that that's just the goal, right? The goal is to be successful enough that you can just kind of stop following the law. Anyway, sloppers, I think the lesson here is that if you're extremely talented at anything, whether you're a singer, whether you're an athlete, you know, definitely move your assets to Spain. They clearly have no way to check if you're defrauding them. So I think that's today's Slop Chop legal update. For all you aspiring artists out there, SoundCloud rappers, future star soccer players, just know that they're not gonna be able to prove where you are. And you know, they may fuck up so bad that they actually pay you an extra $6 million just for your troubles. Now, speaking of hate watching, have you guys seen the new Star Wars brand product manufactured by the Walt Disney Company? I'm, of course, talking about the Mandalorian and Grogu, which follows the adventures of Pedro Pascal's body double and his adopted Yoda son, Grogu, as they collect bounties of war criminals across the galaxy. The film stars Pedro Pascal, Sigourney Weaver, Jeremy Allen White, and 1 million CGI creatures and puppets. You know, we were talking about hate watching in sport, and I started watching. I recently did an experiment. I challenged myself to watch the Star Wars sequels. Not just because I was bedridden following a back surgery, but because I felt like I owed it to myself to really see if my negative feelings towards Star Wars was actually justified. You know, for some reason, you know, I grew up, I watched all the Star Warses. You know, I saw the prequels. I watched the original trilogy, probably out of order, but you know, I was fine with it. You know, I was never completely moved by it, but you know, I enjoyed it. There was nothing, I had no issue with it. And by the time the sequels started coming out, there was just something about Star Wars that became just completely vulgar to me. It was just in your face all the time. They were cranking out movies. They were doing those horrendous like fan events. I mean, people were watching a trailer for a movie over 100 times. You know, it just baffled me. And look, you're entitled to be as big of a fan as something as you want, but you have to have a modicum of understanding that maybe what you like is not like the best thing ever. Like, there's plenty of things that I like that I recognize is like, you know, is it objectively good? Maybe not, but I still love it. I acknowledge its flaws. I see I see why people would have a problem with it. And you know, maybe I'm still unapologetically a fan of it. Like, example, I love the album Cherry Bomb by Tyler the Creator. It is messy. It is like horribly mixed, but man, there's just something about that album that gets me. But if you came up to me and were like, "Hey, I don't like that. It's a mess. It's ugly. It's gross." I'd understand that. And in my mind, Star Wars fans just seem to completely lack any self-awareness at all. That they really thought that Star Wars was the equivalent of like The Lord of the Rings or Dune or like some fantasy world that had been thought out and fleshed out. Oh no, but the Clone Wars, the animated series, the books. I mean, I couldn't stand it. And you know, they were just cranking these movies out, and for some reason I just became this Star Wars cynic. Just anytime I saw anything Star Wars, it made me want to throw up. And I realized I was being a hater. I was hating for virtually no reason. I was you know, I don't know. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I was jealous the IP I liked wasn't getting 18,000 shows a week on Disney Plus. You know, The Simpsons has been downhill for 20 years, you know, and yet they make a new Star Wars product every single day. You know, and so I took it upon myself to give the sequels a shot. And I watched Force Awakens again. I think that was the last Star Wars movie I saw in theaters. Watched it again. Solid. Fun movie. Like, no, you know, was it mind-blowing? Was it mind-boggling? No, but it was fun. It was a fun, enjoyable movie that had charm and had, you know, some level of fun. And then I watched Last Jedi, and I was like, oh. I I'm sort of understanding now. And then I watched Skywalker. And let me tell you what, Slop Nation, Harvey is right. That is one of the worst movies ever. It's one of the only movies I've ever seen that gave me a headache. An actual physical headache. And I completed my experiment. I watched them all. But you know what? I came to have real sympathy for Star Wars fans. That they really do love the world. They love the characters. They want the world to be fleshed out. They see the opportunity. People read the books. They get lightsaber ceremonies at Universal. And Disney is constantly slapping them in the face. I mean, it is an abusive relationship, the Star Wars fandom. And I came to have real sympathy for them. And I never expected that. And so, I decided, I was like, hey, I've been a major Star Wars hater. Why not go see the new Star Wars product? And there was a lot of reasons why. I mean, first, the show was, it's been a pretty massive hit. I mean, Rotten Tomatoes, season 1, 93%. Season 2, 93%. Season 3, 84%. I mean, that's shills on Rotten Tomatoes liking it, but that's usually a good sign. And 2, there hasn't been a big Star Wars movie since 2019. This was Disney's shot to help people overcome Star Wars fatigue. I mean, part of the issue I imagine is that when you put out 15 Star Wars shows a year, and they're all mid, I mean, it's, people aren't into that anymore. And so I went into this movie with, I'll admit I didn't watch the show, but part of the test of a good movie, if you're going to reboot your franchise or refresh it, based on a TV show, a layman like me should be able to come in and watch the movie and understand what's happening. The movie has received pretty lukewarm reception from critics. It's got like 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, pretty high, positive feelings from the fans, like 89%. And, I went in kind of hoping the movie was going to be complete dog shit. Like, I was hoping for a dumpster fire. If you're Disney paid shills that preview the movie, you only get a 62% out of that. I was like, oh, this is going to be trash. This is going to be so bad it's good. Like, and ultimately, it was a perfectly serviceable film. I mean, I think the critic consensus on Rotten Tomatoes kind of nails it. Bountiful in action, but threadbare in narrative thrust with its episodic structure, this Star Wars is more of a skirmish that coasts on the charm of its central dynamic duo. So Mando and Grogu. So I'll start out with just a general synopsis, then we'll jump to spoilers. So pre-spoiler, kind of an impossible movie to spoil. Because frankly, there wasn't a lot going on. So, I mean, the basic plot of the movie is exactly what the title says. It is just the Mandalorian and Grogu run around, shooting lasers, collecting bounties, and it was fine. There wasn't it was slow at parts. There weren't really any stakes. But it wasn't trash. I could follow what was happening. I mean, Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, I was like, you had no idea why anyone was doing anything. It was almost like so over the top, so like up its own ass. Like you couldn't even penetrate what the characters' motivations were or anything. This movie, extremely straightforward. You've got, I mean, apparently, according to my friends who I watched it with, it was just like watching 5 episodes of the show, which, it was perfectly serviceable. But as I was watching the movie, I realized that I was thinking about who is the target audience for this movie? Like, what is it's this weird, like gritty but like wholesome, cute combination. Like you've got the Mandalorian hunting down war criminals for money. And his plan to catch war criminals is to just kill every single thing in his way with one laser blast. And for some reason, he decides to take his infant son with him on these things. So, that's like a weird, gritty thing that, like, what's the deal? And then the rest of the movie is like the Minions movie. You've got just like whole scenes of baby Grogu walking around and grunting, and they even use the stock baby sounds for him, like the like it was baffling stuff. I was like, is this for kids? Well, it's pretty violent. Is it for man children like me? Well, no, it's kind of baby stuff. But as I was sitting in the theater, I was listening, observing my surroundings, and I realized, they give a joke, right? And who was laughing? All of the moms. All of the moms in that theater were enjoying that movie. Moms and grandmas. It was like 10-year-olds and their moms or their grandmas. And I really started thinking, I was like, oh, that's who this movie is actually for. The Mom DeLorean and Grogu is really a movie for moms. Now, Landon, what are you talking about? How can that possibly be? Well, let's just take the cast, for example. You got Pedro Pascal. He's handsome. You got sexy Jeremy Allen White as a big Jabba the Hutt creature. And that has sex appeal all on its own. Men, women, everybody loves that. Every single person loves that. And then you got Sigourney Weaver, ultimate grandma Chad, completely phony in her performance, but you know what? She's recognizable. She is beloved by moms and grandmas. And all the jokes, like, weirdly, like, it was just like mom humor. Like, I don't know another way to say it. Like, it's just, I don't know. It was so bizarre. And then throughout the movie, Mando will turn to Grogu and say some parental platitude. Like, he'll say, and I know that apparently he does this in the show, but oh my God, he was sleepwalking through this movie. Zero inflection. All right, kid. I'm the Mandalorian. He's probably in the movie for, it had to be a stand-in the entire time. It probably took him 30 minutes to film this movie. But like throughout the movie, he's like turning to Grogu and telling him like parental guidance things, like, Grogu, always wear a seatbelt. Grogu, don't fill up on snacks. Grogu, like, the old take care of the young, then the young take care of the old. And it was like the movie was written so that parents could take their kids to it, and then when their kid was being a little shithead, they'd be like, hey, remember what Mando said? Wear your seatbelt. Hey, buddy. Hey, kiddo. Remember this? It was as if Disney made a movie that, in the guise of a bounty hunter collecting bounties on war criminals, it was a way to parent the children. It was a way to give parents a way to teach their children the things they were too lazy to parent them otherwise. Just extremely bizarre. Extremely bizarre film. There was just several things about the movie that took me out. Like, for one, Jeremy Allen White is sexy Jabba the Hutt. He's got abs. He's looking good. He's looking good. But they like kind of pitch shift his voice, and he just sounded like Seth Rogen the whole movie. It was like, it was, I was like, did Seth Rogen do this? And it took me out of it the whole time. And his dialogue was, for the most part, like, the movie's dialogue, like, inoffensive, like, it was usually fine, but he would say things like, he'd be like, I'm not my father. I'm my own man. And then later on, he'd be like, remember what I said. I'm my own man. I'm not my father. And after that, I was wondering, is he going to be his own man? But then he said it a third time, so it did kind of bring home for me. So just bizarre things like that, you know. It was fine. I mean, it's nothing to get upset about. It's nothing to get up in arms about. But it's a weird choice for Disney to make a kind of like middle of the road mom movie to re-energize their franchise. I mean, I don't see how anyone would get excited about this. You know, it didn't move the plot of the show, because I can tell you that, you know, we basically, the movie starts and ends, you know, with no stakes. Like nothing was, the status quo was not changed. So anyway, an inoffensive movie, nothing to get worked up about, but just a weird creative choice, a weird business choice for Disney. I don't understand their plan here. Like, what is the goal? Like, oh, well, what if we put out a movie that appeals to parents and their 10-year-old? I mean, this movie was violent. Like, I mean, granted, Pedro Pascal literally just one-shots everybody. I mean, he just pew, pew, and everyone just goes down in one hit. I mean, I was never worried about him. Like, he doesn't miss a shot. It was incredible, you know. But, you know, because of that, I was like, well, we had this weird, like, clash between, like, war criminals and, like, the Minions movie, and I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's a movie that I feel like, you know, you're saddled with the kids for the weekend, you know, your or grandkids, you take them to this movie, and yeah, it's pretty violent, but you know, there were some good lessons to be learned, and I could follow it, and there was no bad language. And yeah, you know, yeah, we're hunting down people for money, and you know, for one bounty, we're killing 50 people. But you know, the movie's about family, and that's what's so powerful about it.
It's about family, and that's what's so powerful about it.
It's better than 2 of the 3 sequels. You know, I mean, I give it a 2.5 out of 5. You know, probably not worth your time unless you're a diehard fan, but you know, you could do way worse. You know, like for example, you could be a fan of The Boys. Boys ended this week, I believe, or something. And I've got some things to say about The Boys. I don't really understand it. I also don't know who that show is for. You know, I remember 3 seasons went by and people were just like, "Oh, The Boys, it's crazy, you know, it's like so dark and twisted and it's like edgy and it's just, you know, you got people exploding and it's just, you know, they don't pull any punches on Amazon." And I was like, okay, you know, like I when it was coming out, I was just so sick of everything superhero. I was just like, you know, just no thanks. And you know, I was curious. I knew the last season was coming out. I was like, okay, maybe I'll start it. You know, maybe there's something to the show. And I watched the first 4 episodes, and I was just secondhand embarrassed the entire time. I mean, and not because of like the general concept. I mean, like it is kind of an interesting idea. Like, not that not like a what if superheroes are real, but like what if superheroes were real and there was this like corporate structure around them that, like, you know, well, how would that work? You know, isn't that what we would do? We would, you know, if we had superheroes, we'd franchise them, right? We'd advertise for them. They'd sell products. I mean, it you know, all that stuff is you know, kind of interesting. But the dialogue, oh, like if I was watching that show and someone walked into my house, I would be so embarrassed. I would be so embarrassed. I'd be ashamed. I actually cannot believe the actors could even say those lines. Like, I mean, it's as if every single episode, someone was like, you know what? I'm gonna write something even cringier. I'm gonna write, you know, the some horrible reference to assholes or some graphic sex act, and just, I mean, I don't know how they said it with a straight face. And then you get this juxtaposition between like, oh, it's gritty, it's real. And then these people are talking like, no human beings talk like this at all. Nobody, not a single person. It is like they created their own like lingo. You know, I mean, it at least affirms that it's not AI because only human beings could write dialogue this atrocious. But anyway, I watched the first 4 episodes and I was just like, I can't do this. There's no way I'm gonna get through this. And then, kind of on a lark, I was like, well, you know what? What if I just watch the 5th season? Maybe it gets better. So I started the boys again, mostly as a joke. I would be on Discord with some buddies and we'd watch it, and we'd have subtitles because you just don't want to miss any of that dialogue. You don't want to miss. I mean, there are so many genital references. I mean, you just don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss that stuff. It's really stuff you need to think about. It's really stuff you need to think about, audience. Slop Nation, you guys need to, if you were wondering about different ways to say something gross about the human body, watch The Boys. So anyway, we start the show and somehow 4 seasons have gone by. I've jumped in. Any well-written show should be so complex. So the story should have moved so far that I'd be lost. But, this is The Boys we're talking about. So we start the season and I'm like, well, the ball has not moved at all. Our characters are still doing the same thing. Homelander's a bad guy. We're trying to stop him. Yada, yada, yada. And the thing about that show that, and I'm not trying to be pretentious here, sloppers, but to say it's on the nose is an insult to other ham-fisted things. I mean, it's like satire and parody is not just putting things from the real world in a show. That doesn't count. That's not satire. Like, you can't just say, like, racism bad. Like, yeah, everybody knows that. Everybody knows about, corporations, big money. I mean, it's like a caveman wrote this stuff. And when you watch it and you're like, what are they trying to say? If the plot hasn't moved, if the satire is the most obvious thing ever, if the dialogue is vomit inducing, like, who is this for? Like, even if I was 14, I think you'd get secondhand embarrassed if you were watching that show. I mean, yeah, maybe I think the head explosions were cool. So, spoilers ahead. Please skip ahead if you don't want spoilers. So, 2 episodes into the 5th season, we were just like, screw this. Let's just watch the finale. I mean, let's get it over with. And it just, not a fan of the show, as you can tell, but I mean, there's no effort. I mean, they put no effort into this. Like, the fight with Homelander, anticlimactic. And once again, they couldn't help themselves. They had to get in like the cringiest, grossest dialogue at the end. Like, then they were like, oh shit, we've got like another loose end with Butcher. Oh, well, what if we just wrap it up in 1 second? It was like, it just was like, I don't know. I mean, hey, comment, tell me why I'm wrong. Say, Landon, you're stupid. The Boys is brilliant. You're just a prick that doesn't know what he's talking about. It's actually very smart. And, maybe it is smart. Maybe it's too smart for me. Maybe there's just so much going on that my lizard brain just can't follow it. But I'll tell you what, I don't know how you get through the dialogue. Everyone on that show that's a writer should be embarrassed of themselves. The actors should be embarrassed for themselves. Every time somebody opens their mouth, it just undermines whatever kind of message the show could possibly have, which is none. So here at Slop Chop, because Harvey isn't here, we're giving The Boys 2 big thumbs down. If you like The Boys, you're a big dummy. And tell me why I'm wrong. Comment, send me an email, send me a carrier pigeon, explain to me, at the very least, you can tell me, Landon, the dialogue isn't dumb. Here's why. I want to hear from you. I want to know how the line, he doesn't know his clit from his clavicle, cannot make you want to jump out of your own skin. So anyway, sloppers, we're moving on to some different kind of news. It's pig-related news. You know, Hollywood has been very favorable to pigs over the years. We got big pig celebrities. We got Piglet from Winnie the Pooh. We got Babe. We got whatever the pig's name is from Charlotte's Web, Wilbur. Spider Pig from The Simpsons. You know, pigs, much beloved in our society as Americans. Bacon, pork chops. You know, we've loved pigs for generations. And you know, what you guys haven't really realized is that that's just Big Pig trying to distract you guys from the damage that these animals can cause. And that takes us to Osceola County, Florida, where wild hogs have been spotted tearing up grass and frightening pets in the community. Residents say that a nearby construction is pushing the animals closer to their homes.
Wild hogs causing problems in another Central Florida neighborhood in Osceola County, where wild hogs have been causing a lot of damage and frightening residents. A couple of small hogs digging up dirt, and not far behind them, what appears to be an adult hog closer to the woods. These
piggies are just so cute. I'm sorry. They do not look scary. They are just kind of rooting around in the mud. There's like little babies. It's just, they're sweet, they're nice, and it's just hysterical to me that now we have a giant battle between the HOA and the builders, who apparently their construction has caused these piggies to move into the neighborhood and seemingly dig up dirt and cause nothing else. But you know, this is just you know, the liberal media scare tactics. Because lest we forget that pigs can do some real damage. And this news story has reminded me of one of my favorite memes of all time. So let's go back to 2019. You know, pre-COVID, we didn't know all the horrible things that were going to happen to us. And life was simple for some of us. Not so for those rural Americans who have to deal with 30 to 50 feral hogs that run into their yard. So if some of you may recall, on Twitter, a gentleman named Jason Isbell posted in 2019, after, I believe, a tragedy related to guns, said, if you're on here arguing the definition of assault weapon today, you're part of the problem. You know what an assault weapon is, and you know you don't need one. To which All-American William McNabb responds, legit question for rural Americans. How do I kill the 30 to 50 feral hogs that run into my yard within 3 to 5 minutes while my small kids play? And that may go down as one of the greatest tweets of all time. It evokes so many beautiful things about America. First, the way this guy is describing his life, it's as if he's at the bottom of a hill with a big fence, and that there's an army of pigs just over that hill. And at dawn, those pigs will bum rush his house. They are organized. They are prepared, and they have massive numbers. And you know what? They're not just attacking at any random moment. They are specifically coming for your children. And it is just one of the funniest things for me to imagine is that this guy sits in his house with the knowledge that at any moment, 30 to 50 feral hogs could just eviscerate his home, eat his children whole, you know? And he knows that Big Hollywood has said, oh, Babe is sweet and Piglet. But no, he's out there in the shit, sloppers. He is out there dealing with 30 to 50 feral hogs that could raid his house at any single moment. I mean, this guy needs a castle. He needs a moat. This is not something that weapons are going to solve. I mean, this is a siege on this man's home. And he pauses it to rural Americans in general, as if all of rural America is dealing with this problem. And if they are, we here at Slop Nation support you. We do not stand with the pigs in this one. As cute as they may be, sometimes they're just rooting around, pissing off your HOA. Other times they are cold, they are calculated, and they are coming to eat your children. And I'm not here to fearmonger, but I do encourage all rural Americans to invest in the Slop Chop moat services. We're going to be providing giant fences, trebuchets, drawbridges. We offer zero down financing. So please reach out to Slop Chop. Comment here if you need a pig moat. We are willing to build that for you. And just keep your kids safe. Don't let them get mauled by 30 to 50 feral hogs, because 29 hogs, probably doable. Once you're outside of that range, you never know what's going to happen, sloppers. I'm going to end with, I've been doing a lot of hating today. We've been talking about hate watching. We've been talking about my jealousy of celebrities that can get away with tax fraud. We've been talking about how I'm too dumb to watch The Boys. My distaste for hog-related damages. But, I'm going to talk about a couple things that I do like. A couple things that I think are worth your time. And these are movies that are seemingly completely random. But things I've been watching lately. I watched a movie called The Swimmer, which was one of the most 60s things I've ever seen in my whole life. And sloppers, I try not to be pretentious. I just am this way. It is not my fault. My team won the league. I'm reinvigorated by America's fight against the hogs. It's been a lot going on in my life lately. So I decided to chill out and watch this movie called The Swimmer. And I don't even know how I heard about it. I think I was on Roger Ebert's website, and I was just seeing like the movies that he had loved. And not that I think Roger Ebert is the be all end all of movies, but certainly a decent place to start. And I was like, I looked at his movies, like what are his favorite movies ever? And I started at the beginning, like when they were released. And The Swimmer was up there for 4 stars. And like the caption of the movie is like, a man decides to swim in all of his neighbors' pools in, rich Connecticut. And I was like, that can't actually be a movie. Like, how would that even work? And, I didn't really know anything about it. I had never even heard of it. I'd never seen anyone recommend it. And so I put it on. It was free on YouTube. This movie's, 60 years old at this point. And it was one of the most fascinating things I've seen in a long time. I have been thinking about this movie for weeks since I saw it. The premise is exactly what the title says, is that you got Burt Lancaster, who, let me double check that's who it is. Not another Burt. Yeah, Burt Lancaster, who kind of looks like George Clooney. I didn't even know who this guy was. He's I'm trash, right? I don't know big, actors from the 40s, like, I'll admit. He runs out of the woods. Movie opens. He runs out of the woods. And he just shows up at this really posh, super nice house. And he just jumps into the pool. And he gets out and he's talking to his friends. He clearly knows these people. They're, like classic 60s people, or well-to-do people, I guess, in the 60s. I mean, I guess in the 60s, everyone was just absolute blitz the entire time. So, every single house of this movie has a full bar cart, like a completely full, like, liquor cabinet at all times. And, that's just an aside. It's funny. Just watch it. So Burt Lancaster's, you know, he's talking to these people and he's like, trying to beg them to go swimming with him. Nobody wants to. And as he's talking to these folks, he realizes that every house in between all of his neighbors all have pools. And they're like, let's say a half mile to a mile apart in this very, very affluent Connecticut area. And he's like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jog to each of my neighbors' houses and swim a lap there. And I'm going to swim home to my house. And if that isn't a trippy premise for a movie, I don't know what is. And so the movie goes along, and it's kind of like a stage play that was turned into a movie. And so what Burt Lancaster is actually doing is like going through his past as he visits all of these places. He runs into an ex-girlfriend because he comes out of the woods. Nothing about this guy. It's like he's like we have no background on him, and we only learn background on him through these interactions with these characters. And it is just a fascinating film. I mean, it is, will certainly win you brownie points when it comes to being a pretentious film person. But, and yeah, there's some creepy 60s touching, face kissing, Burt should have kept his hands to himself a lot of the time in this movie. But if you can look past that and kind of see it for what it is, which the movie doesn't pull punches. It's kind of like, it shows how he acts and how people treat women and how women treat men, but it shows it for what it is. It doesn't like, glamorize anything. And the story is told through this guy's interaction with all of these people from his past. And he's trying to sort of reach nirvana or come to some kind of spiritual awakening through this journey. And it was trippy. And, I don't want to spoil it. It just was it was a trip. It was a movie that I've never seen anything like it. It is totally worth your time. It's only an hour and a half, which is the length that all movies should be. It's free on YouTube. And, if you're ever wondering what it was like to be completely loaded and vapid in the 60s or, late 60s, I mean, look no further. I mean, people were just hammered at all times. I mean, it's really something to see. So go check that out. That movie's sweet. If you're looking for something a little less melancholy, a little, you're like, Landon, how do I get a panic attack? I'm so comfortable in my life. What do I do? Well, here's what you do. You go watch Martin Scorsese's After Hours. That's what you do. That movie, To Foil the Swimmer, is another weird fever dream of a man's journey, except this time he is going through the streets of New York in the 80s, having the worst night of his life. It's a complete fever dream of all of your social anxieties and nightmares coming true. It is a fascinating movie. It makes your skin crawl. It is brutal at times, but it is unlike anything else I've ever seen too. So, I don't want to spoil that movie. It's on a lot of people's watch list for a reason. My friend that recommended it, I had no idea what to expect. We started it at midnight and ended at 2 a.m., which felt right with the movie. I mean, the movie takes place at night, and it really makes New York look like such a wonderful place to be. So if you're thinking about moving to New York, go watch After Hours. If your life's going too good and you're like, Landon, I'm not stressed out enough, check it out. Because I don't see how you don't want to leave your own house. You're so uncomfortable. And, you know, then chase it with the swimmer. And next time you're at a party and you want to impress a film student, you can say, well, actually, I just watched The Swimmer again. And I have some thoughts about Burt Lancaster and the American Dream. Sloppers, we covered a lot of good stuff today. I hope that you guys will like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Big shout out to Harvey for letting me stand in. It's been a lot of fun to get to talk to you guys about all the things that I like with, no one telling me otherwise. So I can definitely see the appeal of, having your own podcast and just being able to spout whatever you want. So hopefully this episode gets aired. Hopefully it's longer than 5 minutes and Harvey deemed that I did a good job. But, make sure you like and subscribe. Support the channel. Tell your friends about it. Go watch a movie for free on YouTube from the 60s just for fun. Watch a sports game because you just hate the other team. Go to Spain for less than 182 days and you don't have to pay taxes. So I've been Landon, your guest host today, and stay sloppy out there.